Peace, family. It's good to be back. Let's get straight to work. Today, we want to talk about the plight of Black teachers and the silent suffering of Black educators. As we know, there's a huge problem with the literacy rate in our community, the dropout rate in our community, and it appears that Black children just are not faring well in the public school system and in even some of the private school systems. Recently, an article was written that bore witness to what we already know, and that is that Black students fare better under teachers who look like them. But when you look at the landscape of teachership across America, 82% of all the teachers in America are white and only 8% are Black. And out of all the teachers in America, only 2% are Black male. So our children are going to school every day, engaged in an educational process in institutions where they are greatly misunderstood. One of the reasons that they say that Black children fare better under Black teachers is because Black teachers tend to have higher expectations of Black students than white teachers. And if you don't have a certain expectation of the child that you're teaching, you'll only push them so far. You'll only exert so much energy, mental and otherwise, into that child's success. Why? In the back of your mind, you don't expect them to succeed in the first place. Now let's talk about my experience in the public school system. I grew up in an independent school district called North Forest ISD. And growing up in the 70s and the 80s, I can honestly say that there were no white students at my school, maybe one or two white teachers. But most of my teachers, the vast majority of them, looked like me. And there's one in particular that I would like to talk about. She was a journalism teacher by the name of Miss Leonard. As a high school student in 9th and 10th grade, I was generally a student who got average to poor grades. If I got a C on my report card, that was pretty much good for me. But it doesn't mean that I was an unintelligent child. As a matter of fact, sometimes a teacher would fail me, but still recommend me for honors classes for the next grade that I would be passing into, because they knew that I had the ability to do the work, but I had problems at home that prevented me from being the best student that I could be. And in a lot of cases, like most Black students, I just was not interested. So my English teacher, who took a liking to my ability to write in 9th grade, she recommended me for a journalism class. Now, back then, I thought I was cool. I halfway wanted to be a little, street dude. And I never even heard the term journalism before. All I knew is that this was a class for squares and that I did not belong there. So when I saw it on my schedule, I went to the class and I immediately said to that teacher, I got to go to the counselor and get my schedule changed because I don't belong in this class. Well, the journalism teacher who had communicated with the English teacher about my writing ability convinced me to stay for 2 weeks. And in that 2-week period, she convinced me that I had a unique talent to write. Not only did she convince me and give me confidence in my ability to be a writer, she recognized that my mother had a drug problem and I had other problems at home. So she became a mentor to me. And she started entering some of my writings into competitions and things of that nature. And then I started winning. Then she started taking me to competitions. And it was the first time in my entire life that I competed with white children academically, and I was beating them academically. And it gave me so much confidence because I didn't even realize that subconsciously that I could compete with white children when it came to academia. But were it not for this teacher, there's a certain side of me that is still developing that wouldn't be developing to this day. But she had an impact on me. And if a teacher can have an impact on me 30 some odd years ago, teachers and educators can have an impact on students today that will affect them on into the future. So I tell that story to illustrate the point that Black teachers are not just important. Black teachers are vital. Black educators are not just valuable. Black educators are invaluable. If our students have a better chance at success under Black educators, then the Black educator is vital to the future of the Black nation. Now, prior to integration and prior to the Brown versus Board of Education historic decision, Black folk had no choice except to educate their own. According to research that I've done or was given to me, I don't want to say I did the research, but the literacy rate was higher then than it is now. The dropout rate is higher now during integration than it was during segregation. And what segregation did is it literally derailed the careers of many great Black educators. I'll give you an example. If this is a railroad track, and on this side of the track you have white schools, and on this side of the track you have Black schools being taught where Black teachers are teaching Black children. Well, when Washington, D.C. said, let's integrate, the students were brought out of these Black schools into white schools, but in most cases, the Black educator was not brought into these white schools because in the white community, they still demanded that white educators and white administrators be over their children. So many of the careers of great Black educators were derailed and destroyed by this thing called integration. Now what do we have? We have a situation where the vast majority of our children aren't getting what they need in these public school arenas because they're greatly misunderstood. During integration, you had something called the culture of Black teaching. And that went away when those Black teachers were no longer able to teach those Black children. So most Black teachers that I know personally are frustrated. Some of them are depressed, and most of them are on the verge of leaving the public school system because they see so many ways that they can better educate Black children, but they're handcuffed by laws, handcuffed by policies, and handcuffed by constraints that says, do it this way, even if this way is not working for the children in your community. So Black educators and Black teachers have to find a way to unite. Black educators and Black teachers have to find a way to help us in our community to start Saturday schools. And in these Saturday schools, our children can get the learning and the teaching that they're not getting in public schools. Like every community should have a Saturday school where we focus on entrepreneurship. Before integration, Black teachers had to teach Black children about entrepreneurship. Why? Because they weren't deluded into thinking that they could get an education and get a job in the business where on the front door it said whites only. So Black children learned how to do for self then more than now, But that teaching is needed now more than ever. We should teach agriculture in these Saturday schools. We should teach etiquette in these Saturday schools. We should teach public speaking, how to handle yourself in encounters with law enforcement. All of those things that are not tailor-made in the curriculum for our children in public school, we have to find a way to implement and teach those things to our babies in our own communities. But before we do that, we have to recognize the need for a Black-centered education. Now, when it comes to recognizing the need for Black-centered education, a recent New York Times article stated that many Black families are opting to remove their children from traditional public schools and put their children in schools that have what are called an African American centered curriculum. See, even if you have a Black student and you have a Black teacher, if that teacher is commanded to teach that Black student about George Washington before he teaches the Black student about George Washington Carver, then you're still getting an education that's laced with a white supremacist mindset. We can't produce our best if we're using that type of curriculum to educate our children. So we have to also remember that when we look at the problem in education today, when we look at the dropout rate, when we look at illiteracy, when we look at all of the myriad issues that our children are having in public schools, we're quick to blame the teachers. And in blaming the teachers, subconsciously, we blame the Black teachers first. That's how it is in America. Anytime in any arena, a group of people are getting the blame, the Black people gonna get blamed first. That's how it is, unfortunately. But we can't place the lack of education of our children solely at the foot of Black teachers. We have to remember that education does not begin in preschool, kindergarten, or first grade. Education actually begins in the womb. And when a mother is found to be pregnant, the environment that she allows that growing baby to be in is that baby's first experience with an education. Why? Because the baby's already beginning to be shaped and molded. This is why in the Asian community, if an Asian mother wants a child to be a mathematician, she starts reading math books to the baby while the baby is in the womb. This is wise. And once the baby comes into the world, whatever takes place in that household where that baby grows up is that baby's foundation for education. So when you take the baby from that space and give them to that kindergarten teacher or that first grade teacher, the teacher can only work with what you've given them. So nowadays, teachers not only have to be teachers, they got to be mentors. They got to be mamas. They got to be aunties. They have to be cooks. They have to be psychologists. They have to be drug counselors who counsel children who have parents with substance abuse problems. There's got to be a better support system for good Black educators who have a good heart to educate our children. And we as a community have to create it. So solutions. The solution is simple, but it's obvious. We have to open up our own schools. There are quite a few here in the city of Houston. You have the elevated places. You have a school called Muhammad University of Islam coming out of the Nation of Islam. And we have a chain of schools across the country. We also have a school called God's in the Tray meaning in the Third Ward. A progressive school with a Black-centered curriculum that is producing giants. We got to produce schools like this. They got to start popping up all over the country if we're serious about our babies having a glorious future. So I want to encourage black educators to unite. Start having private meetings and talking about different ways to escape the chains that have been placed on you as an educator. And we as a community have to take portions of that $1.2 trillion spending power that we have and build institutions where educators can actually get paid a decent salary to shape the minds of our future. We clap and applaud when we see that LeBron James just got a multi-million-dollar contract, and that's good. That's good for the brother LeBron James. We're happy for him. But what about the person that has to teach your child how to read and write? Are we concerned about how much money they make? Are we concerned about whether or not they can pay their rent or keep food on the table? We live in a backward society when a man can get paid more money for throwing a ball through a hoop than teachers get paid for shaping the minds of our future giants. So brothers and sisters, let's unite. Let's create Saturday schools in every community to make certain that our children are getting the supplemental education that we need. If our babies are in the public schools, let's learn how to penetrate the public school system and come in and become a mentor and make certain that our babies are getting at least portions of what they need, even in the school system. And last but not least, we must do what is required of us as a people, build our own educational institutions so that we can oversee the future of our nation by making certain that our babies get a proper education, an education wherein they can see themselves. Peace.